Aloha and welcome to Military in Hawaii, brought to you by the Chamber of Commerce Military Affairs Council. And I'm your guest host, Dan Leaf. I go by Fig, and I usually am seen on Figment's Power of Imagination here on ThinkTech Hawaii. Today, we're going to provide an update on an environmental incident that happened at a U.S. Space Force installation on the Haleakalā volcano. That's what we're going to do, talk about this incident. But first, I got to talk about the guy who is our guest, Brigadier General Anthony. I like to call him Chachi Mastalir. Chachi, how are you, brother?
Hey, Fig, aloha.
We go back, so truth in advertising, we go back a long way, almost 20 years to when I was an old guy. Wait, that makes me a really old guy now, at Air Force Space Command. And a brand new young major showed up to head the space superiority requirements branch at the headquarters, right?
That's right. And boy, I tell you, working for you back then, of course, it was General Leaf.
Yep.
But yeah, those were good times. We were conquering the world, weren't we?
We were, and you still are. And I'm watching the world. You've done a lot of things, and for the viewers, we're talking about a serious incident here in Hawaii, and another environmental incident after the challenges of Red Hill that the military in general and the Space Force take seriously. And General Mastalir is the guy working to lead the recovery effort. So I just got to put it out there. This is one of the best guys you could have. If you look at his biography, everything he's done better than others, been distinguished graduate, outstanding graduate, and I know his work. But General, something that I know, because we got together soon after you arrived here, is you arrived in Hawaii with a natural cultural sensitivity to the importance of the island, the aloha spirit, everything that we love about the place, the aina, the culture. How did that happen? Was that part of your upbringing? Are you just a good human being? What's the dealio?
Well, hey, Fig, first of all, appreciate all the kind words. Absolutely not worthy, but I'll take them. So yeah, it was fortuitous that you and I were able to sit down early upon my arrival, because the Chamber of Commerce and the Military Affairs Council, those kind of organizations are a really huge benefit to the military, apparatus, and then connecting with the community. And I knew very, very quickly upon arriving, I had never been stationed in Hawaii before, but living and working in Hawaii and understanding the importance of respecting the culture, respecting the fact that we were sharing land with Native Hawaiians, and that we had a responsibility. Mm-hmm. And you kind of shared a little bit of that with me when we first met. But I look to reach out to those kind of organizations because they help me connect and understand what are the concerns of the local community. Sometimes, as you know, it's noise mm-hmm. issues, or it's encroachment, right. or there are other issues where we have to kind of work together with the civilians that live and work around us, and we want to fit in.
Right. And there's a saying. I was a poli-sci major because I'm not smart enough to be a real space guy like you in college, and the saying is that all politics are local. Well, even space is local. We'll get to that in the end about how the important capabilities that the U.S. Space Force and the space component provides are truly local in their impact. But in this case, you had an incident at one of your facilities, and as I'm going to read this so I get it right, Commander, U.S. Space Forces Indo-Pacific here as the man for space things, you took the lead for it. So General Mastalir, if you would, please take us through three things kind of quickly for our viewers. What happened? What have we done? And what are we going to do about it? And weave in, as I know you will, the special considerations for the location.
Yeah. So this this was such an unfortunate event. And I got the phone call. I was actually TDY when we first covered this. I was temporary duty, working at a location in Colorado, and I got the call from the CSO, the Chief of Space Operations. That's the highest ranking member of the United States Space Force. Happens to be General Chance Saltzman, and had learned of this fuel spill, and immediately the Secretary of the Air Force, General Saltzman, the Chief of Space Operations, asked me to drop what I was doing and get to Maui right away. It was that.
So the ask thing, that's what we say that in the military. Yeah. There's no ask about it. Get your butt. Yeah, good.
That's right.
So the priority came from the top at the outset.
Right from the top, right? So they recognized the significance of what had happened, and they wanted to make sure that that it was handled correctly. So what happened? Maui isn't known for severe lightning storms. I'd say really Hawaii in general, traditionally, is not known for severe lightning storms. But we had one of the worst electrical storms on the 27th, 28th, 29th of January, just a few months ago. And what happened was significant amount of damage due to overvoltage conditions on our electrical equipment. A lot of electrical cards had to be replaced. Some fried components.
Were these direct? I have to ask out of curiosity. Yeah. Were these direct lightning strikes like we envision, where the lightning bolt strikes the antenna?
Yeah. No. So what's interesting is, and we've been working very close with our partners at HECO, and looking at the National Weather Service and all of the lightning strikes in this area, we didn't sustain a direct hit per se. But there were roughly, 26, well, first of all, there were 12,000 lightning events during that period of time. And what we found was about 26 air-to-ground events within, say, 1,000 meters of our facility. So
think about that. Lightning never strikes the same place twice. Baloney.
That's right.
And within 1,000 meters, within less than a mile, you had 26 lightning strikes.
Yeah, air to ground.
I'm glad I wasn't golfing there.
Right, right.
Could have been bad. Wow, so, I mean that's incredible.
Yeah, and when I first, I'll fast forward just briefly, but when I called the governor shortly, really within a few hours of being notified. In fact, I was still in Colorado working it from there before I could get a flight. And immediately his office was like, "Oh yeah, we're tracking bad lightning storms that weekend, right?" So this was a known event, but what we didn't realize at the time was the extent of the damage. So we have a situation where we lose commercial power, and that happens occasionally. We have a HECO substation right at the summit, right at the perimeter of the installation. We lose commercial power. We have a backup generator, which then kicks on automatically to provide power to the facility. When power was restored, commercial power was restored, that generator did not turn off. Now, this is right now our first indication that, something is wrong, right? Something is, it should have, the generator, once it recognized that commercial power had been restored, the generator should then have shut down, and when we realized that it hadn't, we started investigating. So we had maintainers on the site, technicians looking at it, pulling various cards, trying to figure out, trying to basically force the generator to shut down.
Cards being circuit cards.
Circuit cards.
Like you have a computer just to visualize it. So they're trying to figure out why this generator is still running and make it stop running. based on the control system.
Right. And they weren't successful. And keep in mind, this troubleshooting is taking place. This is outdoors. You're at 10,000 feet, howling winds, rain is coming down sideways. So, I hand it to the maintainers that they persisted as long as they did, trying to figure out. They got to a point where they realized they were going to have to call in the subcontractor who is right there on island to troubleshoot and help troubleshoot this generator and determine exactly what's going on with it. So that's Sunday evening. Monday morning, they head back out. This is the 30th now of January. Head back out to the generator.
And as far as they know, the only problem is it's running when it doesn't need to be running.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
So they head back out to the generator, open up. Now the generator sits in, think of a shipping container, right? It's a Conex box. Sure. It's got doors on it. But it opened up the doors, and that's when they realize that diesel fuel is basically a small stream of diesel fuel. Think of when you draw water from your refrigerator door, right? And you're filling up a cup of water. Yep. It was a small stream, but coming out of
it's still diesel fuel.
It's diesel fuel, right? Yeah. And it's coming out of one of the connections to the actual diesel fuel tank and the generator tank. And so that's when they kind of realize, they look down, there's, maybe a half an inch or so of there's sheen, the reflection from the oil, diesel fuel on the floor, on the concrete pad of the generator. And then they start looking around and they realize, okay, it has spilled off the pad, and we have a situation here.
Okay, so I'm going to interrupt because I think this is an important part of responsibility, the responsibility the military has, that goes to the levels of these folks trying to deal with the generator problem. From that moment to there's diesel fuel shining on the floor, to somebody in the command getting a call. How long would you say it was? Days, hours, minutes?
No, I would say it was probably early the next day.
Okay.
Because there's a number of things that have to happen. The first thing that has to happen is you have to make sure that the area is safe, right? Because now you have an uncontained fuel spill. A generator is still running. And so the first thing you do is you call Maui Fire Department, right? That's the first step on the checklist.
Dial 911.
Yeah, essentially. Right.
So there's a checklist for this, by the way?
Yeah. We have a fuel response checklist at all of the sites. In fact, we've since made some edits to it. We've made it better than it used to be, just based on our experience. We're always trying to learn from any types of experiences like this. So then the next question is, okay, how much fuel is missing, right? And presumably now it's spilled. And we did a very conservative calculation, meaning that there was some variance. In other words, depending on how full the tank was when you started, it's basic math, right? Go ahead.
No, it's interesting, but I imagine our audience going, well, okay, so what did you do about it? So let's get to the important part. Fuel is spilled. You realize it's significant. You're notified. You're bought into it. Now, what did you do about the response, and what was special about the response tailored to this sacred location?
Right. So after discussing with the governor, we talked to the mayor, and it was actually Mayor Bisson who recommended, hey, there's some local groups that you should probably talk to. So we reached out to Kako'o Haleakalā, Kila Kila o Haleakalā, Friends of Haleakalā. These are local organizations that have a deep standing relationship, a responsibility, if you will, to kind of protect this sacred ground. And I actually pushed off the first press conference until I had an opportunity to sit down with these local organizations and listen. Right, I called it the listening campaign.
What? You listened? What a concept! Yeah. You're a general. Do you have to listen? I'm being facetious. Good for you.
If you want to do it right, you listen to the people who actually live and have that relationship and live in that area. And so we listened. In fact, we spent, some of your viewers may remember there were some posts about protests, at Haleakalā. We invited those organizations to the summit that Sunday. So we actually reached out, wanted to have a meeting. They said, hey, can we bring friends? Can we bring signs? I said, you can bring whoever you want, bring whatever signs you want. This is an opportunity for you to express yourself in any way you feel is appropriate. We sat down with the leadership of those organizations in the conference room at the summit for about an hour, listening to what it is that they had to say. And then we walked down to the generator where all the protesters had gathered, and we brought them all in, and we did kind of a town hall meeting with all of my, I'd say all in all, there was probably between 60 and 70 folks there. And we just answered questions for 2 hours, right? So it was like a 3-hour Sunday morning that we just spent listening, answering questions, but mostly just listening. And it's not just, I tell you one thing, Fig, that sometimes it's, and this is fair criticism. You can listen, but then you have to follow through, and you have to actually take action based on the information that they're sharing with you. And that's where I really, really am grateful for the Secretary of the Air Force, Secretary Frank Kendall, and his support from the very top. Because when I would report to him, hey, I listened, and these are some cultural imperatives, is what I call them. I have regulatory legal guidance that I have to follow. So the state's, Department of Health regulatory guidance, I legally have to follow. The cultural imperatives, if I'm smart, I absolutely need to follow, right?
So I'm picturing, first of all, for our viewers, Secretary Kendall is still the overall secretary for the Space Force. There's no Secretary of the Space Force. So even though Secretary Kendall is the Secretary of the Air Force, he has purview over the space component and the space things. But, I've been in situations, not exactly like this, where you get a lot of help from the outside, and they're the experts, and they really are there to assist you as you deal with the situation. But they don't come in necessarily with that local view. Did you hit any points where, the outside experts there to help said, do it this way? You went, hang on, brother. We're not doing it that way because it won't work here.
Yeah. We had a number of organizations, and some actually purported to, understand all the cultural sensitivities. And I met with them as well, and I listened. And so, for example, I asked, well, what would you do with all of the contaminated soil? And they said, oh, that's hazmat. That needs to be trucked down the mountain and taken out of here and put in a landfill somewhere. And I said, you don't understand this area at all, because nothing comes off of Haleakalā. I learned that pretty quickly just listening to these groups. This is sacred ground. And like I told them, and I'll tell your viewers, I don't have a right to operate at the summit. It's a privilege. This is a privilege for us to be able to operate. And
we'll talk about why that's so important to be able to operate later, but it is a privilege. It's, I was a wing commander in combat in somebody else's country, Italy at the time. And I never forgot that I was a guest, and that I owed respect to everybody around me. And good for you.
So we would kind of weed out, some of the folks that, purported to have all the, and so we said, okay, great, thanks for your input. And what we did then is we sat down, and it's interesting because I had the support from the secretary. I was able to work through that lower level folks kind of telling me, hey, you talk about going above and beyond in your press conferences, and you should be careful with your language. And I said, I am being careful with my language, because that is exactly what we're going to do.
Yeah.
We're going to go
above and beyond in terms of doing more than the minimum required.
That's right. And the government in general would say, well, we'll do what's legally required and nothing more. But again, this is a special place, so we got to handle it differently.
And it takes leadership like yours to help folks understand it. And part of my leadership is making sure we talk about everything we want to talk about. So I'm going to ask you to summarize briefly what has been done already. What have we accomplished?
So this is a three-phase project. First phase is complete. We completed the first phase last week, and we basically have 84,000 pounds of contaminated soil that has been excavated and put into what we call super sacks. The super sacks completely, seal the contaminated soil, making sure that nothing leaks. They're designed for this. They are actually at the summit. Again, nothing comes off the summit. And then we sourced backfill locally, because just like nothing comes off the summit, nothing is introduced to the summit. So we sourced backfill. We lined the excavated area so that the backfill would not become contaminated. Now here's the situation. You can only dig. You're at 10,000 feet, very porous. It's terraced landscape, meaning that you have this very porous, loose lava rock, and it's terraced landscape where the generator is. It's sloped. You get to a point where, due to the structural instability that comes about when you start digging, you can only dig so far. So let me paraphrase in dumb fighter pilot language. This fuel leaked, unfortunately. You got all of the fuel contaminated, I'll call it soil, but we know it's very different than your garden soil, out that you can without leaving this sacred place looking like a strip mine. That's right.
And now you're going to remediate what was taken out in a both environmentally responsible and aesthetically appropriate way. Did I get that right?
That's right. Not only are we going to remediate what we've excavated, but we have to continue to pursue this, treating the soil that we could not excavate. And so we're going to be in the next phase, we'll be doing some coring down 40 feet, 80 feet, and 200 feet down. And we're going to core and then test those samples. And then we'll look at other alternative methods, in situ remediation, meaning like a fuel-eating enzymes, things of that nature, that we can do without disturbing additional soil.
So looking a stretch of a metaphor or analogy, it's sort of like having some bad tissue removed, but then having some remaining that still has to be treated. Right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay, that's pretty complicated, and you're not done yet. You're not done.
We're not done. And we have another contract. We thought we would have that contract let this week. I think it'll be next week. And that contract is actually going to a Native Hawaiian organization, Native Hawaiian company. And we'll be glad to get them on board, and they're going to help go through this site characterization, do these borings, the sample, and then provide us recommendations for phase 3. which will then be actually remediating, cleaning that soil again on the mountaintop, on the top volcano, as well as treating the contaminated soil that we could not dig up.
So, because I'm looking at the clock, and I always enjoy chatting with you, Chachi and Tony, whatever, General. But let me see if I'd summarize this for the folks. And I mean this. First of all, I think this is full disclosure. They recognized the problem. They took action immediately. There was interest at the highest levels. There's also interest at the lowest levels, getting local and finding out what was the right thing to do. They put extraordinary effort above and beyond, not because they have to necessarily, but because it's the right thing to do. And we're not done yet, right?
That's right.
So why are we even there? I know because, Chachi, as you know, 20 years ago, I was in Iraq with the land forces. 24 years ago, I was leading combat missions in the F-16 over Serbia. I never spent a second in combat where space capabilities weren't integral to my success. And this is a space situation awareness facility on Haleakalā. So let me stay on my soapbox for a minute and say to our viewers, I don't care what you do, but don't spend a minute without being reliant on space capabilities either. They're pervasive in everything we do. And GPS is the most noteworthy, but there are many more things that make our modern life possible. And to keep that possible, not just from adversaries, but accidents and environmental incidents in space, you've got to have space situation awareness. What do we get from this unique installation in a common or in a sacred place that you can share? Why is this so important?
This is one of the best locations in the world for deep space observation. So when we think about the deep space telescopes, and day or night, and quite frankly, the Native Hawaiians ancestors knew this too, right? They would teach astronomy at the top of Haleakalā. And this this is rooted in some of the first settlers of the area, and we continue to do this. There's a number of organizations. It's not just the U.S. Space Force, University of Hawaii, and there's a space solar telescope. So there's a number of organizations that operate there at the Mount. Why we want to be there? We want to be there because we can reach and see our satellites all the way out to geosynchronous orbit, which is 22,300 miles above Earth. This is a special orbit where the satellite revolves around the Earth at the same time the Earth rotates on its axis. So it appears to a person standing on the Earth, when you look up, that satellite is always overhead. Right.
It's prime real estate in an orbitology sense.
It is. And the adversary knows that. So when we talk about protecting and defending, vital U.S. assets, that prime real estate, understanding what the adversary is doing in that prime real estate in terms of potential weapons designed to take away our space capabilities, that's where the space domain awareness becomes really important.
And how many miles did you say that was? Because
22,300 miles.
But I said all space is local, so those capabilities, 22,000 miles away, will affect your son or daughter, whether they're in the cockpit or with a rifle or sailing in the ocean, on a daily basis, and especially if we wind up in a conflict. So Absolutely. What we do there is vital. It's vital locally. It's vital for normal peacetime life, especially vital if we reach a conflict situation. Hey, General Mastalir, it is so good to have you here. I am really encouraged by your approach to this. And I hope they'll use the response of the Space Force to this very unfortunate, it's kind of too soft a word, it's a bad thing, to this bad thing that happened as a case study for how the military can get things right when things go wrong, because you've done it with sensitivity, thoughtfulness, and respect for both your neighbors, the local residents, and for the INA around you. So, yeah. Hey, thanks for sharing all of this, Tony, and I really appreciate not just you appearing, but what you're doing. So, mahalo for your hard work and Kakua.
Wow.
Go ahead.
So I was going to say, thank you so much, mahalo for bringing us on. The last point I'll leave with your viewers is, once we get everything cleaned up, the effort is already underway to, okay, now how do we ensure that something like this doesn't happen again, right? And I mean, it's not good enough to say, well, it was a freak of nature, act of God. No, that it doesn't matter. We have to be prepared for those once in a generation electrical storms. That is not an excuse, and we have to do better, and we're going to. So we have 30 some recommendations that we're working through right now to ensure not just this site, but any of the generators that we have on the islands and really across the Department of the Air Force, that we have the right safety mechanisms in place so that when a freak occurrence, such as this electrical storm, should occur, we're still prepared. And that's our commitment.
Yeah. Great. And that's the right commitment. Thanks so much. Viewers, thank you for tuning in to Military in Hawaii, brought to you by the Chamber of Commerce Military Affairs Council. I'm Dan Leaf, ordinarily your host of Figments, the Power of Imagination. I'll be on ThinkTech again in a couple of weeks. I hope you'll join me then. And I got to plug myself. Why don't you check out New York Times on March 29th, when my article on preventing war with North Korea occurred. I never thought I'd appear in the New York Times. I think it's an important article. I know nuclear war, and I'm against it. So please check that out. And don't forget that ThinkTech Hawaii is a nonprofit corporation, totally dependent almost on your donations. Go to the website, click donate, and help us keep these stories coming. Aloha.
Thank you so much for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.